Helen Keller's life has been celebrated for the courage and optimism by which she lived, as much as for the work she did to improve the lives of the blind and the deafblind. Born in 1880 with full sight and hearing, Helen Adams Keller grew up in Tuscumbia, a small town in northwest Alabama. Tragedy struck in 1882 when she was just 19 months old and became seriously ill with brain fever, which left her blind and deaf. The next few years were very difficult for the family. Helen was a wild child, full of rage and frustration because of her inability to communicate. It wasn't until she was 7 that Helen would say her real life began. Anne Sullivan, a young teacher from the Perkins School for the Blind, was sent to teach Helen. Anne immediately started teaching her to fingerspell. She would spell out particular words into her hand, and although Helen could repeat these back, she didn't really understand what they meant. It wasn't until Anne had been teaching for a month that a miracle occurred. Anne led Helen to a water pump in the garden, and she placed Helen's hand into the water as it flowed. She spelt into the other hand. Then something clicked in Helen's mind. She understood that the letters in her hand were describing the cool, gushing water. Immediately, she asked what other things around her were called: the water pump, the ground, and the trees. From this moment on, Helen's life and world expanded because she could communicate. She learned Braille and could even type on a conventional typewriter. She learned to understand people by touching their lips and throats as they spoke. Helen was a highly intelligent young woman and became the first deaf-blind person to graduate college. Anne Sullivan remained her companion until Anne's death in 1936. After World War II, Helen and companion Polly Thompson spent years traveling and fundraising for the American Foundation for the Overseas Blind. Helen first visited the UK in 1931, where she met King George and Queen Mary at Buckingham Palace. She returned again after World War II.
I'm happy to be back in London.
I'm happy to be back in London.
I have so many memories.
Of which I have so many endearing memories.
And I am affectionately associated.
And with which I am affectionately associated.
In my work for the blind.
In my work for the blind.
Helen's experiences as a frustrated child made her especially eager to help deaf-blind children around the world. Helen and Polly visited 39 countries where Helen met with heads of institutions and delivered lectures. She was greeted by throngs of children, and Helen gave inspiration and hope to the blind and deaf-blind in these places. From her Radcliffe days onward, Helen began a writing career and worked tirelessly to improve conditions for the blind and deaf-blind. She published 12 books and wrote numerous articles on blindness, deafness, social issues, and women's rights. She was friendly with notable figures such as Alexander Graham Bell, Mark Twain, and Charlie Chaplin, and met with many famous personalities of the day, including Winston Churchill, India's Premier Nehru, and every American president from Grover Cleveland to John F. Kennedy. The last president Helen met was Lyndon Johnson, who honored her life and work in 1964 by conferring upon her the nation's highest civilian recognition, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Helen Keller lived a productive and full life despite her disabilities. She died quietly at home in 1968, aged 87.